$30 million moves faster than a marriage does. The flowers in my hand were already dead, not wilted dead. They just hadn't gotten the memo. I'm Scott Livingston, 40, 1 years old, majority owner of a company my father built from nothing. And on that particular afternoon, the single dumbest man in Amarillo, Texas, I'd bought 24 white roses. I had flight tickets folded in my jacket, pocket printed on paper because Priscilla said tickets felt cheap. Paris, 10 days, a hotel, 2 blocks from the Seine. I'd planned it for months. I wanted to surprise my wife of 11 years with a second honeymoon. Instead, I walked into her engagement party. Nobody told me. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to the afternoon. I walked through those glass doors holding dead roses and a plane ticket to nowhere, and watched my 38-year-old wife kiss the 45-year-old CEO of my own company in front of every person who'd ever called me boss. 60-70 people crammed into the lobby, balloons in silver and gold, a banner across the reception area read "Congratulations, Brantley and Priscilla" in gold cursive. I stood in the doorway and watched her pull back from him, laughing, cheeks flushed, holding up her hand, a diamond the size of a raisin caught the ceiling lights. The crowd cheered. Somebody popped a champagne cork somewhere behind me. A shop floor supervisor muttered low enough that he probably thought I couldn't hear it, "Ain't that her husband standing right there?" Nobody answered. The room went quiet, the way a room goes quiet when everybody realizes the same terrible thing at once. Then she saw me. I want to tell you, her face fell. It didn't. She looked annoyed, like I'd shown up early and ruined the reveal. "Scott," she started, and I watched her decide whether to finish that sentence with an explanation or a demand. She never got the chance to pick. I turned around and walked away. Didn't say a word, didn't drop the flowers, didn't throw the tickets, just walked out past the receptionist who wouldn't meet my eyes, out into the parking lot where the panhandle wind was already kicking dust across the asphalt. By the time I turned the key in my truck, the whole thing was already over. Not the marriage that had been over for a while. I just hadn't been told. I mean the company, her future, his future, all of it, quietly, invisibly, already coming apart at a seam. Nobody in that room could see, because 3 weeks earlier I'd started pulling threads, and you pull enough threads, eventually the whole sweater comes off in your hand. I met Priscilla at a supplier conference in Fort Worth when I was 29, still learning how to run a company my father had handed me, half by choice and half by exhaustion. She worked marketing for a competitor and cornered me at a hotel bar to argue my branding looked like it had been designed by an engineer instead of a marketer. That's because it was, I told her, I designed it myself. That explains everything, she said, and smiled at me in a way that made the room disappear for a second. 6 months later, I hired her away. A year after that, I married her in a church outside Amarillo, my father walking her down half the aisle himself, because her own father had passed, and she didn't have anyone else she trusted enough to ask for a long time. It was good. We built a life, slow, deliberate, plenty of arguments about paint colors that never once felt like the kind that end a marriage. She was smart in a way that made me better at my job. Just by being in the room 2 years ago, I promoted Brantley Cole to CEO, so I could step back and focus on the engineering side, the patents, the actual work I loved. She raised a glass to it. That night I raised mine right back. No idea what I was actually toasting to. I run Livingston Industrial. My father built it from a 2-bay welding shop into a company that made hydraulic components for oil field rigs across 3 states. When he passed, I inherited 83%. Most of the company's core product line existed because of patents I personally held, not the company, me. A quirk of how the business was structured decades ago that nobody ever bothered to change, because why would they? I was never going anywhere. It started small. Priscilla stopped wearing her ring, said it caught on things at her desk. She started taking calls in the stairwell instead of her office phone pressed tight to her ear, voice low. She stayed late more than her role required when I asked if she needed help. She'd smile that practice smile, warm on the surface, nothing underneath, and say she had it handled. It was my sister Natasha who said something first. She was 36, worked 2 floors up in accounting. She'd never liked Brantley, said he had a way of standing too close to people when he talked to them, like proximity was a negotiating tactic. I'm not saying anything, Natasha told me over coffee one afternoon, but Sonia mentioned Priscilla, and Brantley left the last investor dinner in the same car and didn't come back for after drinks. Sonia was my assistant, sharp-eyed, discreet to a fault. If Sonia noticed something and mentioned it, that wasn't nothing, probably nothing I said, because that's what you say when you're not ready to hear the other thing. Probably, Natasha agreed in a tone that meant the opposite. I started watching, not obsessively. I had a company to run, but carefully. I noticed the stairwell calls. I noticed she'd started going to a boutique gym across town instead of the one near our house. I noticed the ring coming off one evening. I asked her about it directly across the kitchen table over dinner. Neither of us was really eating. You've been distant, I said. I'm running marketing for the biggest quarter this company's ever had, she said, not looking up. That's what you can call it, Scott, work. You stopped wearing your ring. It's been catching on my keyboard. I told you that already. You've told me a lot of things already, I said. Doesn't mean I believe all of them. She looked at me, something flickering behind her eyes. I chose at the time to read as hurt instead of guilt. If you have something to accuse me of, she said, say it plainly. Don't sit there fishing. I didn't have it plainly yet, so I let it go the way you let go of a splinter you can feel, but can't quite see. Telling myself I'd deal with it once I had something solid in my hand. And then I noticed the paperwork 6 weeks before the party. I was going through routine patent maintenance renewal notices and noticed something that made my stomach drop before my brain even caught up to why someone had requested access to the licensing agreements. A formal request rooted through legal, asking for full documentation on which patents were licensed to the company versus held independently, and under what terms those licenses could be renegotiated. The request had come from Brantley's office. I called Jace, my lawyer, that same evening. Why would my CEO need to know whether he can renegotiate patent licenses that belong to me personally? There's only one reason a man asks that question, Scott, Jace said. He's trying to find out what happens to the company if you're not in it anymore, meaning somebody's doing math on a future, or you don't own 83% of anything. I sat with that long time. I thought about the stairwell calls, the boutique gym, the ring that didn't fit anymore, allegedly. Suddenly, after 11 years of fitting just fine, I didn't know the whole shape of it yet, but I knew enough to start protecting what was mine before somebody decided. It wasn't 3 weeks before the party. Jace laid it out for me in his office, blinds drawn like we were doing something illegal instead of something smart. Right now, the patents are licensed to Livingston Industrial on a handshake structure your father set up 30 years ago. No formal contract the second somebody else is running that company and you're just a shareholder. They'd rather not deal with that. Ambiguity becomes a weapon. So what do I do? You formalize it, Jace said. Now, before anybody else moves, you create a separate holding entity, clean, simple, unassailable, and transfer the patents into it. Then Livingston Industrial licenses them from the holding entity under a real contract with real terms. You write a shell entity structured beautifully, nothing that traces back to Scott Livingston on a casual search. Is this legal? I asked. It's not just legal. He said it's smart. You're not stealing anything. Those patents are yours. You're just making sure everybody remembers that before somebody convinces themselves otherwise. We named the holding entity something forgettable, registered in a neighboring state, filed by a paralegal who had no idea whose interests she was protecting. Over the following weeks, every patent underlying the company's core product line moved out of my name and into that. Entities then, it licensed them back under a contract with one clause Jace. Insisted on buried on page 11 any material change in majority ownership or controlling shareholder status of Livingston. Industrial constitutes grounds for immediate license review subject to renegotiation or termination at the holding entity's sole discretion. At the time it felt like paranoia. I didn't realize I'd just built a trapdoor. My wife and my CEO were about to walk straight over 4 days before the party. Rockwell Das, my father's oldest investor, called straight to business the way he always did. Brantley came to see me about debt financing, wants to expand the manifold line, take out a loan against company assets, $12 million. The covenant, the lender's requiring, is standard on paper loans contingent on stable controlling ownership. If the majority shareholder situation changes suddenly, the lender's got the right to call the loan due immediately. Brantley signed off without blinking. A man only signs a clause tying company survival to stable ownership if he's already decided the ownership situation isn't going to stay stable. I sat with that for 2 days before the party came. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't change my routine. I kept coming home, kept eating dinner across from a woman who was already planning a life that didn't include me. I wish this had been different. I wish Priscilla had been the kind of partner who came to me instead of around me. I wish the marriage had earned an honest ending instead of a staged one. But wishes don't hold up. Documents due the night before the party. I sat alone in my study with the lights off, just the glow of my laptop screen. It was 11:50 when I opened the final transfer documents Jace had prepared weeks earlier. I read through them one more time, not because I doubted them, but because I wanted to feel the weight of what I was about to do. I called Jace. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been waiting. Ready? He asked. Ready. I said. He walked me through the final signature page by page, calm, professional, like a man closing an ordinary transaction. Instead of ending a marriage and a coup at the same time at 12:03, I signed. I am 41 years old. I am still the man who owns 83% of a company and every patent that keeps it running. And 40 miles away, Priscilla was picking out a seating chart for a wedding that was never going to get the chance to happen. She'd find that out in about 18 hours. The party the morning after I signed. I let the day play out exactly as scheduled. Balloons, banner, champagne on ice. I walked in holding dead roses because I never got around to throwing them away, and watched her hold up her hand for the room. Then I turned and left without a word. 3 days later, Brantley walked into the closing meeting for that $12 million loan, the one covenant tying it to stable ownership, already ticking. Rockwell called me the moment the wire never cleared. The bank pulled it. Scott, he said, the moment they ran the updated ownership and licensing records, the whole deal fell apart on their end. Not ours. Priscilla called that evening. Her voice had lost every ounce of the warmth I used to fall for. What did you do, Scott? I signed some paperwork. I said. Paperwork? Scott, the loan's dead. The board's asking questions. Brantley's asking questions. I protected what was always mine. I said. That's all I did. She was quiet for a long time, then very small. We were going to build something together. You already did, I said, just not with me. She looked at me during that call like I was still the man who used to bring problems home from the shop floor just to hear her solve them. I wasn't. I hadn't been for 6 weeks. My father used to say a man who doesn't understand what he actually built has no business running it. I always thought he meant the machines, the manifolds, the valves. He meant the whole thing, the marriage, the company, the trust, all of it. You have to know exactly what's yours before somebody else decides to take it. Brantley resigned within the month. The loan collapse made the board nervous enough to ask for his exit. Priscilla and I finalized the divorce quietly. No engagement, no ring, no headlines. Jace still handles my contracts these days with the same reading glasses on the same chain. As for me, I still own every patent this company runs on. I still walk past our name on the Glass every morning, 6-inch brushed steel letters. I paid to install myself some mornings. I think about those dead roses sitting in my truck for 2 days before I finally threw them out, and I think, maybe I already knew before I walked through those doors that something in my hands had stopped being alive a while, before anybody told me the truth. If you've ever had to stay calm and quiet while protecting something that mattered to you, even when everything in you wanted to scream, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. And if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There are more to come.